Welcome to Shrimp Coverlet, where we squeeze the bigger picture of literature. I'm Miriam Fort.
And I'm Dalton Gentry.
And we're here for part 2 of a 3-part read-along, 4-part series as we journey through Cat's Cradle by Kurt Vonnegut. These were chapters 51 through 100.
Yes, of this great piece of literature that I'm so excited to talk about right now.
I feel like at around part 2 of any of our read-alongs, Dalton has already lost steam. He's no longer looking forward to anything.
It depends. Sometimes, it's good, it's okay, I can keep moving.
Which one? Which one did...
I don't know off the top of my... What have we done recently? It's just been all downhill recently. Not a lot of good literature here, and I was excited about this. And it's not bad by any means. I just have no fucking clue what's going on.
Yeah.
I am so lost in the text, and that's... I don't know.
I think there's several factors at play there, but do you have a rundown sort of where
the best I could here? Basically, we have John traveling to San Lorenzo. We get a lot of the history of San Lorenzo, the anti-religion aspects of San Lorenzo. Somehow or other, John becomes the fucking president because he wants to marry Mona, is it?
Yeah.
And I have no idea what's going on.
Okay.
Yeah. A lot of Baconism throughout this here, and a lot of talk in the history of the Baconon. But I am so desperately lost in this. And going into Cat's Cradle, I knew okay, Ice Nine's the big thing, right? So what we're talking about, this is the book with Ice Nine. And it's just casually mentioned from time to time.
So this is my second time through the novel. Unfortunately, the first time I made it through the novel, it was about a decade ago. That changes.
Okay.
It will change. I promise you that much.
In the last 30 chapters of 130 some?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're looking at the last third.
Not the last third.
What do you mean not the last third?
Not the last third.
The last what?
The last quarter, maybe? Because we did chapters 50, chapter 100, and now it's chapter, 130 is the last one? 125?
Well, so by page number, we're pretty close.
Okay,
Still,
that's fair.
I mean, if you were to break it up into... Yeah, so you're looking at the last third. I mean, you're looking at the downward slope.
It's fair, the downward slope, but up until this point, it's just occasionally mentioned. It's there, or those damn kids. They took the Ice Nine, they hid it in their thermos. But I don't know what to do with this piece right now. I'm hoping something turns around and it's gorgeous in a good Vonnegut turn, because Vonnegut can do that. We do get a lot of Vonnegut throwing in his commentary here and there. You can see that very apparently, which is nice. I like Vonnegut's wit. But I don't know, man. This is not a good text for me.
Yeah, it's rough. I think that the one selling point, like you say, so far is Vonnegut's Midwestern sensibility, right?
Okay.
There are little things in this novel that really remind me of my mother and her sensibilities.
Okay.
Like when he refers to people very casually as a son of a bitch.
Okay.
But no, the son of a bitch had Ice Nine on his neck.
It's fair.
My mother will do that. And I think that's a... if I may interject that this is a Midwestern thing, I think that is a Midwestern quirk.
Okay.
That we will refer to someone in terrible terms.
Fair.
That son of a bitch. But we still accept them as a person.
I actually had a coworker for a long time, good friend, still good friends to this day. I call people a son of a bitch a lot.
Yeah.
And the first time I did it to him, he's like, fucking hold your tone. Older guy, he's like, first of all, you're referencing my mother at this point, and I'll fucking end you. I'm like, oh. So every time I try to have a conversation with the guy, I'd be like, son of a...
Mm-hmm. Really?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
Religious?
Not really, actually.
Really? Okay.
Very strange man. We'll have to talk about him a little bit. He'd be an interesting guy to bring on for this.
Yeah?
Oh, yeah.
Why is that?
He has a very different religious belief that, one I've never heard of.
Like Bokononism.
Like Baconism. I think he'd be a shoe-in for this piece here.
Yeah.
Thought about him a lot reading about this.
Yeah.
But, I don't know, man. But yeah, it's good because it's Vonnegut.
Yeah,
you have your Vonnegut moments.
He's really relying on himself a lot so far in the text.
And I do think sometimes he relies on himself too much. And there are some things here that just aren't working, but he's trying to force.
So to put this in sports terms, if I might, he's Brett Favring this.
He's Brett Favring this?
He's got the strong arm, and he's got some creative abilities. but he doesn't care much for a game plan.
Okay.
So he's going out there and just slinging it.
He's Patrick Mahomesing this.
Yeah,
at this point.
he's relying on the athlete himself.
When was this published? Was this an early Vonnegut or a late Vonnegut?
This was a mid Vonnegut, I believe.
I would feel so much more comfortable with this if this was an early Vonnegut, where he was still finding his voice, still trying to figure things out.
63. So maybe this was an early Vonnegut.
When was Slaughterhouse published? I don't know. But
well, his first one was Breakfast of Champions, wasn't it?
I think so.
Do you have a speaking point? I'll Google it real quick.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit. One thing that it's been irking me a little bit with this is sometimes Vonnegut is just trying too hard.
Dick pic.
That's uncomfortable.
Dick pic. My dick.
Oh, it's all Dick Cheneys. They're nothing but Dick Cheneys. Anyway, we talked a little bit about Vonnegut being Vonnegut, which is a good thing, but sometimes I feel he's trying too hard with the title of this, where the cat's cradle scenes, they just feel a little heavy-handed. It's not quite working for me. I'm not sure what he's getting at. I think it's a ploy on religion. And the cat's there, the cradle's there, but it's not there. It's just, you got to believe in it all. It just feels weird.
Yeah, I think it's a play on a lot of things, actually, as I just mangle the internet being me.
I feel like it's easier at this point if I just find a copy of Slaughterhouse behind me and check.
There's a copy of Slaughterhouse up there someplace, but I'm looking for his bibliography.
Okay. But it's the downfall of a lot of this. It seems like every now and then he goes on a good spree, a good chapter or two. I'm like, okay.
We're getting someplace.
I pick back up. I'm back in the waves of this. And then he just goes somewhere else, which is very typical of Vonnegut. He's a little all over the place. That's a lot of people's big complaint with Slaughterhouse 5 is they don't know what the fuck's going on. They're in World War II, then there's aliens, and there's time travel.
Yeah, and like I said, the reason he gets away with it in Slaughterhouse 5 is because there is he's got a framework to develop it is all over the place.
Okay.
There's not so much a framework here. But yeah, Cat's Cradle was his fourth novel. 1952 was his first novel, so we're 11 years into his publishing history, which was a long publishing history, but in fairness, this was in the midst of him being a novelist.
Okay.
So it was before... Oh, Breakfast of Champions was like his 9th. Player Piano, that's right. Sirens of Titan, Mother Night, then Cat's Cradle, God Bless You, Mr. Rosewater, Slaughterhouse 5, Breakfast of Champions, Slapstick Jailbird, Deadeye Dick, Galapagos Bluebeard, Hocus Pocus, and Timequake.
Okay. I feel a little bit better in that sense, because honestly, this feels like... It's good.
You're 11 years into being a published novelist, so...
It's good, though. That's the problem. There's quality here. I just don't think he's capitalized on it yet. And maybe he can turn it all around in the last half of this book. I'm excited to see where it goes, at least.
Half?
Last portion of this book, excuse me.
Maybe a 10th.
A fourth. But anyway, math is so hard. I'm terrible at it. Anyway, it just feels like he hasn't found his way yet. He keeps trying to do all the typical Vonnegut things that we're comfortable with in Slaughterhouse that just aren't executed as greatly here. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, so if you're looking at it timeline-wise, that's because he hasn't developed the skills yet, I guess.
I think that's what it is.
Honestly, I haven't read any of his first 3 novels. Though.
Okay.
This is the earliest Vonnegut with which I am familiar. Did you have anything else you want to talk about? Any big points?
Where did this go wrong? At what point are we lost in this?
Okay, so I think a lot of what's happening is because we have an underdeveloped main character.
Okay.
We have 30 to 40 additional role players.
It's Game of Thrones.
And we're also being thrown key terms from a religion with which we have no familiarity.
Okay.
That are then being reintroduced and we're supposed to remember them from the first time they're used.
And this is meshing back into part 1, but I think it was fine when we're talking about John's going to write this book. He's going to write this book about Honecker.
Yeah.
They're going to move. They're going to get all this. He's getting his information. But when he gets on that plane and he goes to San Lorenzo...
You've got 6 characters thrown at you immediately.
All hell breaks loose, and I am completely lost at this point what's going on with it.
Yeah, and Vonnegut does an amazing job of characterizing people.
Okay.
But when you've got too many thrown at you too fast that are all doing something slightly different but have something to do with the same storyline, it becomes difficult. And then you're throwing in terms like he was in my Carrizales.
Yes.
It becomes even more difficult because then, so you introduce this person, you reintroduce a person, and then you say, oh, well, I realized he was part of my Carras. Now I'm trying to remember what Carras means, and I forget that I don't remember who the person is.
At least they had the forethought to italicize Carras every time.
Yeah.
That helps.
It helps, but it's certainly not... well, and there's another difficult thing with the text. Papa is in double quotes every time it's used, as opposed to the single quotes, which would infer that it is something we're citing, but we are not making a direct quote from it. So we have quotes, a double quotation inside a double quotation when someone refers to Papa as Papa. So these are difficult things with which to deal on a line-by-line basis as we're making our way through a text.
Okay.
Now, unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately, because he wouldn't be who he was if he didn't act as he did, but Vonnegut does not give two shits whether you follow him or not.
Yeah, he's going for it.
Yeah.
I mean, like, credit where credit is due. He's going with it. I mean, he's solidified his plan. He's moving forward with or without you.
Yeah.
And like I said, every now and then when in this reading process, it feels weird because, like, I'll read 3 or 4 chapters. And I'm like, what the fuck just happened? And you have to turn back and kind of recap. And then there are some that glide so effortlessly, and they always end on a good punchy line, which is nice. But I don't know, man.
Well, I think another thing that contributes to the confusion involved in this novel is that the chapters are so short, but they're all titled.
Yes.
So, in addition to trying to remember who this character is and who that character is, because there's at least 2 different characters in each chapter, and at least one key term with Bakonanism, you're trying to realize what that chapter title had to do with the literature in the chapter. You're trying to... A lot of the chapter titles are in the San Lorenzen tongue, so you're trying to decode them, and there's just so much going on.
There's a lot going on with this. And when you just brought up earlier the Papa in quotations, we talked a little bit last week about Hemingway and Vonnegut.
Yeah.
And how they kind of would have went hand in hand, but polar opposites as people. God, if that's a jab, where they wanted to name the character, oh, Papa, how cute is that? I love him even more.
Well, and I think that, so, let me present a quote from the text.
Present.
139 to 140. This is describing Papa as he is first seen. He wore a shoulder holster on the outside of his blouse. The weapon in it was a chromium-plated .45. He was an old man, as so many members of my Carras were. He was in poor shape. His steps were small and bounceless. He was still a fat man, but his lard was melting fast, for his simple uniform was loose. The balls of his hop-toed eyes were yellow. His hands trembled. His personal bodyguard was Major General Franklin Honecker, whose uniform was white. Frank, thin-wristed, narrow-shouldered, looked like a child kept up long after his customary bedtime. On his breast was a medal. Who do those 2 descriptions sound very much like?
Go on.
That sounds a lot like Old Man Hemingway.
Okay.
Beer-bellied, unable to move.
Fair.
And then you've got this description of Honecker, thin-wristed, narrow-shouldered, definitely Vonnegut, looked like a child kept up long after his customary bedtime. How many bags did Vonnegut carry under his eyes?
Hey, let's look at that picture back there. Okay.
Many. So, carrying on, I observed, this is throwing me off. I observed the 2, Papa and Frank, with some difficulty. Not because my view was blocked, but because I could not take my eyes off Mona. I was thrilled, heartbroken, hilarious, insane. Every greedy, unreasonable dream I'd ever had about what a woman should be came true in Mona. There, God love her warm and creamy soul, was peace and plenty forever. That girl, and she was only 18, was rapturously serene. She seemed to understand all, and to be all there was to understand. In the books of Bokonon, she is mentioned by name. One thing Bokonon says of her is this: Mona has the simplicity of the all. So let me expand here. Papa is the Hemingway type writer.
Okay.
Very war-driven, very precise and to the point.
True.
Frank, as Kurt, is the opposite. He's taking the back seat. He's sort of running the show. Both of them are in love with Mona. Mona is literature.
Okay.
Mona, the image of Mona is shape-shifting based on perception. Whatever someone feels a woman should be or look like to be truly woman melds itself onto Mona.
Okay.
And I feel like I'm missing a glaring example, but in literature, we have the example of Galactus. Do you know what Galactus is in comics, Marvel Comics?
Yes.
Did you know that Big Galactus, destroyer
Flying
of
through
planets,
space,
led by, or not led by, but his the Silver Surfer goes and finds planets for him to devour. Galactus is perceived by the race of sentient beings on the planet he's about to consume as that race looks. So humans see him as humanoid because he is so terrifying looking. That is the only thing that we can perceive him as.
Okay.
So the beautiful woman, the literature, is perceived by the perceiver as whatever he needs it to be.
Okay.
Also, we have this in Stephen King's It.
Pennywise shape-shifting to be
Pennywise
the fear.
shapeshifts, yeah. Now, to further solidify this argument as Mona as perfection in art, what is perhaps the most famous painting of all time?
Mona Lisa.
Yeah, I'll be damned.
Okay. Interesting. A
yeah.
good point, actually.
So, Papa is described as having yellowed eyes. Do you know what causes yellow eyes?
Is it... No.
Liver disease can cause
Okay,
yellow eyes. So
okay.
what causes liver disease?
Drinking a little bit too much.
Alcoholism.
Sounds like Papa.
There is an animal noted for having yellow eyes, isn't there?
Okay.
What animal is it?
Is it an owl? I don't know.
Cats.
Okay.
The cat's
Fair.
yellow eyes.
Fair.
You always hear about cat's eyes. Cat's eyes. The marble, cat's eyes, right? The scientist was engulfed in simple things, Honecker, original Honecker, which he used to make war. Hemingway was consumed by war. He was lost there. He was tangled in the cat's cradle. So we have this image of a cat, the cat's eyes in Hemingway, and the cat's cradle, which is being dangled around by the scientist.
Okay.
So the scientist makes war, just plays with the cat's eye, the cat's cradle. Mm-hmm. The artist is lost there, consumed by it. Now, another small thing that happens in these series of chapters is that Frank takes the back seat to John. Mm-hmm. Much like the artist would take the back seat to the persona. So we have the persona. Now, Hemingway, they were lost in each other, weren't they?
True.
Hemingway's artist was lost and engulfed in his persona.
Larger than life.
This Papa that springs up would be both the artist and the persona for him.
Okay.
But for Vonnegut, John would be the speaker, who's sort of an affable guy. You ever seen Vonnegut speak?
Interesting.
Sort
Fun.
of an affable guy, you know. He goes out there and he says funny things in witty ways. But the artist himself, which would be represented by Frank, takes the back seat to hoist up John.
Okay.
What else does Frank give John?
Go on.
Mona.
Okay.
He goes ahead and lets him have the literature. So he gets to parade about and be the persona describing his own literature.
Okay.
Whereas Frank, who is the conveyor of thoughts, who is the producer of the art, subsides to the back seat, where he will be allowed to create.
Okay.
So
look at you go.
I think there's a little bit there. Like I don't know if that's really necessarily the thrust of the novel. I'm not saying I have decoded this bit of Vonnegut, but I think there's something there intellectually to play with.
And because there is something there that strikes thought, there is something to play with. It's quality. There's good stuff going on here. I just don't know if Vonnegut's trying to tackle too much, or if maybe just today I'm not on the Vonnegut wavelength.
Or if he's trying to tackle too little, right?
Okay.
So there would be a similar problem presented if he, as a writer, is trying to tackle too little, in that he has to make up things to occupy his mind as he goes, which making up a religion would do, right? And you also, in that play of ideas, Mona being literature, Mona is represented in Bokononism. So something like the King James Bible, that so many have revered as the greatest text ever written, is revered as a text because of the literature therein, not because of the religion therein.
Okay.
Right? So I think that there's a lot there to be played with. I'll be trying to fit that all together as we come towards our review for this novel.
Okay. I think the review is going to be interesting. Like I said, I am excited to see how it all plays out. I'm excited to see where the Ice Nine goes. I am just muddled in Vonnegut thought right now. And again, I think it's wonderful. I love your comparisons with Hemingway and Vonnegut, because for the love of Christ, we are Hemingway and Vonnegut at this point.
I'll give you that.
100% precise, moving forward, is going to write great things. Batshit crazy, can't keep track of anything, smokes too much. Yeah, might write something nice when I get bored, we'll see. Gotta get old first. It's interesting. But again, I could give two fucks less what's going on in San Lorenzo right now. It just seems like in order to accomplish this loosely based plot that Vonnegut gave us to begin with, he is moving mountains to make it work. There is so much he's trying to do to accomplish so little.
I agree. Very much I agree. But I think that the only reason that's a problem is because it doesn't seem like we have to.
Okay.
Right? So if all of this seemed necessary, it might be easier to follow. Because when these things pop up, you would think, okay, I've got to hold on to that. Vonnegut here is presenting things in such a throwaway fashion that never when an idea or a person or a word or a term or a religion or a place is introduced, do we ever think, oh, okay, I got to remember that one. Mm-hmm. Right?
And, maybe that's just the brilliance of Vonnegut. Maybe, this is a very simple solution, and he's just hammering in the fact, well, sometimes a simple solution takes a lot of fucking work. It doesn't work well in writing, but I'm going to do it anyway because I'm Kurt Vonnegut and I want to do it. Yeah. So I'm not sure where he's getting at with here. But as we dwindle towards the end, anytime I find a quote about a short person, I enjoy it, so I have to read it for you. It isn't the size of the man that makes a pissant, it's the way he thinks. I've seen men 4 times as big as this little fella here, and they were pissants. And I've seen little fellers, well, not like this little actually, but pretty damn little, and by God, I'd call them real men. Thought of you when I highlighted that one.
Well, I think we've got a new title for the show. If we get strip cover lit, we'll just call this The Little Fella and the Pissant.
The Little Fella and the Pissant.
Yeah.
I thought about you, so I had to make sure I quoted that.
Yeah.
I think there's also some good stuff going on here about, with the Bokononism, especially in San Lorenzo, where it is outlawed, but it isn't. It's kind of just this faux thing here. The idea of what is real and what is truth comes into play a lot.
Yeah.
Which is interesting to play with here, because when you go into the overall spectrum of things, when we're talking about war, because that's what we're talking about here, the creation of the atomic bomb, what is the truth? And what is the reality? Because there's all kinds of things that are going to play here. The mythos of the Bokonon, whatever you want to call him, the mythos of the atomic bomb itself. They're really pairing well together, where we're seeing these things here, we're getting a little bit about this, but is it really real? We're getting a little bit about this, is it really real? And I'm hoping it finishes out.
Yeah.
And we get a little bit more of an answer as to what is this reality that we're supposed to be enveloped in at this point.
Well, and when you mention the difference between what is true and what is real, we get this exchange on page 151. They're talking about taking a picture. Do you mind? Do you want me to take my photograph too? Do you mind? I think therefore I am. Therefore I am photographable. I'm afraid I don't have my camera with me. Well, for Christ's sake, get it. You're not one of those people who trust his memory, are you? I don't think you'll soon forget that face you're working on. And he's talking about a painting of Mona. You'll forget it when you're dead, and so will I. When I'm dead, I'm going to forget everything, and I advise you to do the same. Has she been posing for this, or are you working from photographs, or what? I'm working from or what? What? I'm working from or what? He tapped his temple. It's all in this enviable head of mine. So this is the same person who says, You're not one of those people who trust his memory, are you? We get later in the conversation, the same guy says, it's all in this enviable head of mine. So what is true and what is real there?
That's a good point.
Yeah.
I think that...
And what else is happening here? We're working on a painting of Mona.
Okay, which would be a very real thing.
Well, but we're talking about the literature. Mona's the literature.
Okay.
Mona's the work of art. Mona
again.
is the great art.
So there, again, just little tidbits you can pick out of this that are gold, and you can play with all day. But just, so far, part 2 of this, overarching spectrum, just too much going on, Vonnegut.
It's difficult.
It does make me want to read Sirens of Titan, though, just to see if, like, maybe this was worse back then, or maybe this was just a fluke. We should read more Vonnegut. This is a thing.
I think that this goes into... Vonnegut is, at this point, our most often appearing writer on the channel.
This is our 3rd Vonnegut.
Yeah. I don't think we've done 3 from anyone.
Fair.
But I think that this goes into why Vonnegut is so well-known a name and so often disavowed a writer.
It's because you go up to somebody and be like, oh, you read Cat's Cradle? Like, yeah. Like, oh, what's it about? You'd know.
Or you go up to someone, do you like Vonnegut? Yeah, I love Vonnegut. What have you read? Slaughterhouse-Five? Mm-hmm. I mean, I love Vonnegut. You know what I mean?
That's
there's a great disconnect, though, right?
Okay.
You're not going to go out and just pick up Cat's Cradle.
No. Unless you're going to read Vonnegut specifically.
Who has it? Who has Cat's Cradle?
Very true.
Right? He's not the easiest writer to find because he's not the most well-read writer. So I think that these are things which play into that. You read a Vonnegut novel once, a lot of people are good.
True. But we're going to finish it up next week. We're going to wrap this up, part 3 of our read-along, before we move into our review the week after that.
101 through 127?
127, is it? I thought it was 125. Did I just look incorrectly?
Right here, 127, the end.
101 through 127, the end. The conclusion of the novel, Cat's Cradle by Kurt Vonnegut. So if you want to join us on this adventure, make sure you hit the like button, make sure you're subscribed to Strip Cover Lit, and hit the little bell button down below so you know when we have an update. We have part 3 coming out for Cat's Cradle. And if you want to help us continue to create great content like this here on Strip Cover Lit, there's a link, as always, to our Patreon to be found in the description below.